Good afternoon, everyone. How's lunch going? How did our culinary arts do? Thumbs up? Do I see some thumbs up? Okay. Well, please continue to enjoy your lunch. But I have the opportunity of introducing our next keynote speaker. And although he's done some wonderful things, he's very, he just wanted me to share a little bit. Gregory Theyel, Dr. Gregory Theyel, and he just wanted me to share he's very tall. He played basketball, and it was a high school or college, Gregory? In college. But he is truly an expert in the field. So without further ado, I'm going to abide by his wishes. Dr. Gregory Theyel.
Thank you, Vicki. Thank you. I didn't think she'd really do that. That's nice. Thank you. Well, it's a real pleasure to be here because I have the privilege to work with the biomedical industry. And every day I am inspired by people who are trying to save our lives and make our lives better. And so anytime I have a chance to tell the story about the industry, I see it as a real plus for me. So everyone's thanking me for coming. No, thank you for letting me tell this story. So my research goes back about 10 years here. I came over from Cambridge, England, the University of Cambridge, and I came as a +1. My wife accepted a postdoc at Genentech, and I said, oh, I think I'll go over with you. And so they gave me a desk at UC Berkeley, and I was just hanging out there, and Stephen Bader and some folks said, hey, you look like you could use a job. And so they hired me as the director of the Biomedical Manufacturing Network. And so the story I want to tell you today is about what we've learned over those past 10 years. And there's a focus here. The focus is how can what I tell you about the industry help you build a more robust biomedical industry here in the Diablo Valley and all the greater 680 corridor. All right, so everything I'm going to talk about hopefully will kind of lead to those answers. I also really like questions because I know my story and I've told it a bit, but I love when people ask me questions because it pushes me in new areas. So don't hesitate to ask questions as well. So I think I'll get this clicker here somewhere. Great, thank you. Get that picture off there. There you go. So first of all, what's the biomedical industry? The biomedical industry is actually much, much more than just biotech. You hear a lot about biotech all the time, but the industry is much more than that. Yes, biotech is taking living material and trying to make usable things out of it. That's very profound and incredible, but also high risk, high reward, as some of you may know. It's almost like this is the star. This is the quarterback, the high school quarterback, as long as we're on a sports theme here. Biotech is the quarterback, but all of you who know even a little bit about sports know that it takes the whole team. And so the whole industry is actually pretty profound. And so pharmaceuticals is really taking chemical substances and developing them for medicinal purposes. Medical devices are devices that are or reagents that are inside the body that help us. We often think about things as like stents and pacemakers. We also have medical equipment. Those are companies that make anything from a surgical robot to an operating table to any other equipment used for medical treatment. We also have some new sectors called digital healthcare. Some of you are familiar with Fitbit, for example, but there's a whole range of companies that do everything from telemedicine to embedded devices all across the board, keeping you more connected to your medical providers. Right. And then finally, genomics. Everyone hears a lot about genomics. 10x is a company just down the road from here. Everyone's familiar with 23andMe probably. And so genomics is a big deal of taking our genetic code and trying to figure out what it can tell us about improving our health, taking preventative actions to be healthier. All right, so point number one is the industry is much bigger than just biotech, much bigger than just that star quarterback that everyone talks about. So it's a pretty big umbrella. So let me show you a map. This is over 2,000 companies here in the Bay Area. Now, I guess point number two is this industry has a greater concentration here in the Bay Area than anywhere else in the world. San Diego has about 1,000 biotech companies and does pretty well. Boston, Cambridge in Massachusetts does pretty well. They have about 1,500 companies. We have way over 2,000 here in the Bay Area. And it's a real diverse group as well. And that actually is one of the strengths of the industry, because while biotech kind of goes up and down with funding and up and down with clinical trials, medical devices, medical equipment, digital healthcare, genomics, all these other parts of the industry, they round out that portfolio. So when some are up, the other ones are might be down. And so it really gives us a very stable biomedical industry here in the Bay Area. So not only do we have a tremendous number of companies, it's also really diverse, which is, as we all know here in the Bay Area, one of the things you know, if you live in the Bay Area, is, you know, one of our greatest strengths is the diversity of the people here in the Bay Area. And so same thing here with this industry. Right, so why is it clustered here? Just a couple of key things that probably all of you know. There's a great talent pool. Many of the people in this room, highly educated, smart people. That's a big deal here. We got great universities at every level. Community college, Cal State. I am a professor at Cal State East Bay. I take great pride in that. We train people who take jobs here in the Bay Area, and that I tell my students all the time. You keep this economy going. And yes, we've got fantastic students at Cal and Stanford and other places too. Don't get me wrong; those are great universities as well. A lot of research, good research is done there, and a lot of good students come from there too. But we've got a great pipeline of talent all the way through our systems. Right, and so that's part of it. Part of it's we got great labs and universities, so that a lot of good ideas come out of those places. One of the areas of research that I do is why are there hotspots around the world for this industry? And it almost always follows the institutions for research and higher education. And so if you want to track where the other biotech clusters are in the world, identify the universities like the University of Cambridge or University of Tokyo. Many of these companies crop up right around those places. So it's a big deal that we have such great institutions here. Early momentum, Genentech was one of the first in the industry in 1976. That got us rolling. We got on the map as the place to be for biotech, and that has just continued. And so momentum can't be minimized as a reason as well. Great support services. Some of you in this room provide these support services. So you have to have lawyers and accountants, and you have to have people who test the equipment and sterilize the equipment and package the equipment and do logistics for things you make. So that's a big part of this as well. So a real strong support network in the Bay Area. We also have great real estate developers here. Thank you. You're essential as well. You're the risk takers oftentimes to redevelop properties, to go into greenfield spaces. I mean, all of you are part of, we often talk about an ecosystem, and boy, this industry really shows the importance of an ecosystem. Okay. And then finally, like I said, there's been this gravitational force of agglomeration, just having more and more companies, more and more support services, really developing this industry. And so one of the questions I frequently am asked is, how can we get a biomedical industry in our state, city, country? And I often say, well, that's a challenge, because the places that have them actually are getting more and more dense. And this whole idea of, is there a threshold of too expensive? We haven't seen that yet. Companies want to be near where similar companies are. So that whole sense of agglomeration is important. All right, so like I said, lots and lots of companies. All right, and so one time I used to give this talk, and after like the 10th time of saying, look at all the companies, and everyone goes, wow, a lot of companies. I thought, I got to do more than that. I got to tell more of a story than that. And so I started thinking, well, I've got these different parts of the industry. What if I looked in to see if they're located actually in different places within the ecosystem? Wouldn't that be interesting, right? I mean, why would I think that they would be evenly distributed? Okay, and so that's one of the first, kind of stories I want to tell you, is just where these different industries are and why. Okay, and this loops back to the whole question about the 680 corridor and how to bring more companies to Concord and Walnut Creek and San Ramon and all throughout the 680 corridor. So first is the biotech companies. Biotech companies, they follow universities, okay? They follow venture capital, they follow talent, and they also have very particular space needs. Those of you who work closely with the industry know that it's built out labs. It's hazardous waste capabilities. It's bench tops. It's a lot of development per employee. In fact, the capital cost to put somebody into a biotech lab is actually quite expensive. Hence, back to the whole thing about that whole star quarterback and all of what's invested in that person. We think that that's the whole story, but it's actually, there's a lot of other options within this industry. And so if you came today thinking, biotech's the one, we got to get biotech to our jurisdiction, there are other very, very capable alternatives. All right. No offense to biotech folks or biotech companies. There's a lot of demand for biotech space, and there are opportunities all throughout the Bay Area, especially here in the 680 corridor, because most of the space in South San Francisco, great place, in Emeryville, Berkeley, also an outstanding location, they're full. And so new space is being built, but there's opportunities in places here too. Okay, it's just expensive build, and it's probably, my data shows that they're the companies that fail the quickest and the most often. All right. Now, there's a thing in biotech that most of you probably know, and that is, that's not a sad story. That's testing a hypothesis. That's like, hey, this didn't work. Oh, that's good. Now we know. Better to fail quickly, right? We talk about that a lot here in the Bay Area. Better to fail quickly and then move on. That didn't work. Try to test something new. So the people move on to new companies. The ideas get advanced, and so it's not a terrible bad story of, oh, that company went out of business. But it is a churn. It is a different type of relationship between a building owner and an industry or industry sector. Okay. Next is pharmaceutical. Pharmaceuticals spread a lot more broadly throughout the area. Pharmaceutical companies usually need a much bigger footprint. So these companies are more focused. Yes, they still have clean room demands. They still have production and hazardous waste challenges. But in many ways, they are much more like a warehouse setting than a biotech lab. Okay, still high end. Don't get me wrong, but it's sometimes pharmaceutical companies are a better fit, especially further away from the universities. This is more towards a production development stage of a company. And so if you notice here, we've got companies much further afield, off to Livermore, in Concord, down in parts of South San Jose, where land is cheaper, the buildings are bigger. So it's a different footprint with different types of resource needs. Again, like I said, that's the real theme of what I want to share with you today, is that different parts of the industry, different needs. And the people, and there's some real experts in the room here, they know that, hey, these are the resources, let's try to match them up with the types of the right kind of companies. And I'm always willing to help too, by the way. My email address is all over this. And if I can help in any way, someone asked me very politely, I don't get asked this often, they said, but how do you get paid, by the way? I've seen you give these talks and no one ever pays you. How do you get paid? And thank you for asking that. I'm taken care of, well, yes, my wife's at Genentech. I know that should be the punchline, right? But no, one of my contracts is with the Small Business Administration. And so for every hour that I help a company, I get paid by the Small Business Administration. So no equity is lost for the company. They don't pay anything. And we've helped, now it's just not me, there are 9 of us. And we've helped over 800 companies in the 10 years. So so if you have companies that are looking for help, one of the things that happens often is when city people figure out that I can offer that, they take me along to company visits, and they say, hey, here's some free help for your company, so start expanding, and Gregory Theyel and the Biomedical Manufacturing Network will help you for free. So this is pharmaceuticals. Medical devices is a different story. Let me toggle back and forth here for a little bit and catch us up here. So there you see a pretty broad spread, but medical devices are clustered very much south of the San Mateo Bridge. Okay, and there's a reason for that, and that gets into this whole other part of the story about what are the needs for medical device companies compared to biotech and pharma companies. Medical device companies, they need suppliers who can provide components, they need sensors, they need software, they need contract manufacturers, they need a whole different type of machine shops, a whole different type of supply network. All right. And so those of you who are thinking about, that might be a match for my location, because we have those types of companies. I mean, one of the most kind of satisfying moments for me during this kind of 10-year journey was when I met with Kelly Klein. She is the economic development director for the city of Fremont at the time. And she's like, hey, I love this biotech industry. I want more of it in Fremont. And I said, you know what, Kelly, let's sit down and talk about this, okay? I said, you've got a legacy of companies that do medical devices and equipment. You've got a supply network that's really tapped into, and tied into those types of companies. You don't need biotech. Stay away from biotech. Leave them in South San Francisco, right? Leave them where the resources are there, okay, to match up. Instead, go with your strength. Ride that horse that is a good fit for your city. And she said, yeah, that's really amazing. And the good thing about Kelly is that she's a doer. And so she jumped right on it and said, all right, we're going to talk to realtors. We're going to develop a streamlined permit process. We're going to make it easy for medical device and equipment companies to locate in Fremont and expand in Fremont. And we're going to work with the community college, Ohlone Community College, and we're going to develop a pipeline, and we're going to have medical device students and medical equipment students come trained and get placed in the companies. And so she, like I said, she's a doer, and so she jumped on that little piece of advice, and really Fremont went from about 80 companies in 2012 when we started to about 160 now. So they doubled the size, and probably about 85% of those are medical device and equipment. So it's a great case study for saying, all right, who do we really want? What makes sense for us and what we have, okay? So there's a reason why these medical device companies are south of the San Mateo Bridge. Now, a lot of early stage ones are in San Francisco too, so don't get me wrong. San Francisco is a real breeding place for new technologies, something that Mayor Breed didn't know. I had a great meeting with her recently, and she said, I heard you tell somebody, I heard that you told somebody there's over 300 biomedical companies in my city. Is that true? Fill me in on this, because I don't want to not know this story. And so I said, hey, they're tiny, they're early stage, and these are the things they need, and here's where they are. And so mayor of a city didn't know that. It's below the radar. But again, I'm here to share this. If anyone's from any jurisdiction is interested in know what the company profile is for the biomedical industry in their jurisdiction, let me know. I'll share the data, okay? So medical equipment, similar, again, lots of them south of the San Mateo Bridge, as you notice, because medical equipment companies, you're building things. You're building a surgical robot, right? So you need sensors, you need software, you need electronics, those types of things. So it makes sense that they would be in Silicon Valley. One of my favorite archival articles is from the Harvard Business Review, where they said the biomedical industry needs their own Silicon Valley. I was like, no, they don't. They have one already. So not a lot of people knew that there was such a presence in Silicon Valley. There's over 300 companies in the biomedical industry in Silicon Valley. And one of the reasons they're there is because of all the support industry that's there and the talent too. Here's an interesting story. Lots of people worked in the electronics industry, the semiconductor industry. And when some of that manufacturing moved away, we had some really talented people who were still there. And now they work in medical device and medical equipment companies. So it really was this, we'll call it maturing of the industry based on talent as well. Okay. Digital healthcare, interesting news story. These are fascinating companies. Digital healthcare and genomics companies, hey, they might as well be tech companies, really, to tell you the truth, because they don't have, most of the time, they don't have wet labs. Some clean rooms for some of the digital healthcare devices, but for the most part, it's electronics and it's software and it's data. And so you probably aren't surprised, Silicon Valley, San Francisco, and sprinkled out through 680 as well, by the way. There's a real strong talent pool here along the corridor. And so some companies have located in Pleasanton. There's a few in San Ramon. So digital healthcare companies, keep an eye on that sector, okay? And same thing with genomics. If you know this genomics, Pleasanton has 5 companies in the genomics space. Again, 10X moved there, and a bunch of other companies thought, hey, they must be onto something. So let's move there too. Companies, by the way, in this industry love to cluster. They really do. And back to what I said earlier about how there's failure because you test a hypothesis, it doesn't pan out. The people move on, and companies know that too. And so they want to have this developed talent. So it's not direct poaching per se, which happens in some industries. It's more of, we're here because we know that this is a dynamic industry. Okay, so so here's the first kind of takeaway, first story for you, and that is big industry, over 2,000 companies all over the Bay Area, but there are some very specific locations where this industry is clustered based on the resource needs, whether it's medical devices and equipment throughout the kind of former electronics, software, semiconductor part of Silicon Valley and Fremont, and all the way up into Hayward, by the way. So there's a lot of nice manufacturing there. Great opportunities, I think, along the 680 corridor, by the way, for the medical device and equipment companies. Digital healthcare and genomics, like I said, could be tech companies effectively. So I think there's some great opportunities there too. Biotech and pharma, maybe there could be some opportunities, but I would put them on the kind of lower third of the priorities. Medical device and equipment first, digital healthcare and genomics, and then finally biotech and pharmaceuticals. All right. Always looking for exceptions. Genentech says they like a location, and boom, they blow up a new part of the Bay Area. Okay. Thermo Fisher says, hey, we want to locate somewhere in Concord, for example, and right away. That can change the dynamics. So I'm always, keep an open mind in that way. But generally speaking, certain resources, certain locations, right? So let me tell you a little story here. This is a heat map. Kind of shows up cool here. See, those are dense concentrations of biomedical companies. And I stumbled across this one night. And so I'm an engineer by day, but I'm a geographer by night. I love maps. In fact, in the San Francisco Business Times, there's an article. If you search me, the first sentence is, Gregory Theyel loves maps. And then there's this article about some of the maps I made. And so that's the only time I've been in there and quoted, and I'm the map guy. But anyway, maps by night. And so one night I hit on this little tab on the top of my database, and I got this heat map. So I seriously, I went from this map right here and went, wow. And then I just accidentally hit it and hit this thing. And so I went through the books, and most of you are all kind of social scientist planners, I bet, and so you know what a location quotient is. I didn't. So we're always borrowing. Engineers are always trying, how can I borrow this idea and kind of take it and make it my own? And so I spent most of the night, I stayed up calculating location quotients, because I thought, okay, if we've got these hotspots on a map, can I prove it? Can I prove that Berkeley has more biotech companies than the average? The average would be, evenly spread, through a jurisdiction. In the case I looked at California, so the state of California, I just did a little proportion 1-to-1, would be, hey, they're evenly spread. No way. Places like Emeryville and Berkeley were 5, 6, 7, 8, 9s, and 10s. Emeryville was at 11, actually. South San Francisco was way high as well, in the 20s. That's an amazing cluster. And so I calculated all these, and then I started calculating all these support industries like engineering and software and sensors and all these things. And I was able to come up with 5 areas that have these intense clustering of biomedical companies. And I dubbed them, and everyone here is from the Bay Area, so you'll see the humor in this. When I do this outside the Bay Area, people don't quite get it, but I called it the microclimates. The microclimates of biomedical innovation and entrepreneurship. And so what we all know, because we talk about it as, Ryan says, hey, it's 95 degrees here. I'm going to Half Moon Bay where it's 65. So we all know microclimates, right? But I thought, I bet it's different in each one of these clusters. And therefore comes a story that's really pretty fascinating. So these are the 5, and then I came up with little names for them: technology emergence, research commercialization, scale up, integrated products, and proximity pipeline. So let me tell you the second little story here. And so the first one is Emeryville, Berkeley. And the reason I want to tell you these stories is because I often give this talk to university students, even high school students sometimes. And I say, you know what, you got to find where you belong. And spatial locations have personalities, just like, people have personalities. And so I said, here's 5 locations in the Bay Area. You're interested in studying biotech and pharmaceuticals and medical devices and things. Find the space that makes the most sense for you, that feels like home. All right. So Berkeley, Emeryville, microclimate number 1, small companies. 1/4 of the size of average of all the companies in the area. Early stage, much higher death rate. So get ready to move. When you're young, you can do that, right? No mortgage, you're good. Very clustered. Within 1 mile, there are about 150 companies. So there's lots of opportunities. You lose your job, go to another company that's nearby. It's the closest thing we have as kind of a Kendall Square, if you know the Boston area, Kendall Square kind of milieu kind of thing going on. That's what Emeryville, Berkeley is. But it's over 50% of the companies have roots to the university or the lab. Nearly probably close to 60% of the companies have some type of government funding, so grant funding. So they're early stage, they fail often, they've got government money, they're clustered close together. That's a certain kind of environment. And you don't have to be young to like that kind of thing. You know, just if you like the excitement of, you know, moving on to different companies, following a molecule, following a cure, this is your place. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, tech emergence. Like I said, it might as well be tech companies. Digital healthcare and genomics are packed into San Francisco. And their average size is also very, very, very low compared to the rest of the Bay Area. Survival rate's a bit higher. Burn rates much lower if you're a finance person. Okay, these companies, like I said, for $100,000, you're up and going. You know, biotech a company, a medical device company, much higher capital costs, much higher improvement costs for facilities. So, but they're clustered in all along South of Market and the financial area, and like I said, Mayor Breed was amazed. Over 300 companies, and they're almost all right in there too. High location quotients for engineering, for software, for venture capital nearby. So some of the reasons why they are where they are. Okay. Proximity pipeline. Here I'll get a little. This is another catchy. Well, it's funny. It feels catchy to me. But some of you who know biotech well know this story, right? About 20 years ago, biotech companies said, you know what, it's too risky for us to try to develop all the new drugs and have our own pipeline. You know what we're going to do? We're going to find some companies and get them to be close by and let them take all the risk. And so I dubbed this whole concept of proximity pipeline. And South San Francisco is the epitome of proximity pipeline. Most of the companies, there's way over 250 companies there now, and most of them are fewer than 50 employees. They're there pushing their science forward, but everyone else is there. AstraZeneca's there, Genentech's there, Roche is there, Lilly's there. Everyone else is there because they're keeping an eye. They either have an investment or they're watching it closely. This whole idea of having your pipeline, you know, for someone else to take the risk. And if it starts to work out, get through a clinical trial, away you go, right? So very interesting microclimate. About 45,000 people commute to South San Francisco every day. So this is a very intense location where people are very engaged in developing new cures. It's a fascinating location, but as you can see already, a different personality than the Berkeley Emeryville microclimate and the San Francisco microclimate. So again, what's your personality? And here's the point, bringing that back to 680. You know, what makes sense here? How could you develop these different personalities in some of the cities here along the 680 corridor? I think that's one of the really interesting questions we want to try to get at from today. Then the fourth microclimate, integrated products. Again, I told you about how everyone's in Silicon Valley because there's connections. You're integrated with other parts of your value chain. So you can get software, you can get components, you can get testers, you can get a whole range of kind of cutting edge aspects. People often worry about the industry leaving the Bay Area, and some companies do when they make commodity products. Okay, that makes sense, right? But most of the companies stay here because the companies they work closely with are working on new advancements for the things that they put into their products. And so, you know, in many ways, this is an industry to feel good about through a lot of ups and downs in the economy. There's a reason companies are here. Healthcare is long-term, thank goodness. And so there's a lot of real pluses about this industry. And so here, obviously, lots of connections to Stanford, lots of connections to venture capital, lots of connections, as I said, to this very diverse supply network. And then the last one, and I love this story, Fremont, and actually it's spread into Union City, it's spread up into Hayward, and this is scale up. So if you think for a second, if you read there's this kind of conventional wisdom out there that when people manufacture things, they have to do it somewhere else in the world, in the country, not for biomedical. Fremont's a great example. In fact, I was digging through some archives recently of the Mercury News, and the article, there was a little map there, and it called Fremont the foundry of the Bay Area. So, and this was in 2001 or so. So this has been on a while. It was semiconductors, obviously, you know, the whole concept of a foundry, but you know, it still exists. And like I said, there's way over 150 companies in this industry. Almost all of them are growing up. Here's my little, secretly, we all want to be something other than we are. And mine is a stand-up comedian, okay? So you know how when you're young, you live in the city or you live in Berkeley, right? And then when it's time to have kids, you go and settle down in Fremont, right? Same thing with biomedical companies, okay? Start out in the city, start out in Berkeley, got a studio in Berkeley, and you're hanging out, living the good life. And then, but when you grow up and start having those kids, it's Fremont we go, living in that little house, you know, sending them to good schools, which are all, you know, that's all partly why companies move there though. Good schools, middle skill jobs here, by the way. I mentioned Aloni earlier and Kelly Klein. They figured this out. They said, you know what? We don't have to chase South San Francisco. South San Francisco, heck, they're actually the location of the star quarterbacks. That's the star quarterback location. Let them be that. You need people who block for you, who tackle for you, and that's Fremont. And there's been a steady stream of companies moving from all over the Bay Area, but especially places like South San Francisco, to places like Fremont, Union City, Newark, Hayward, when it's time for them to manufacture. They keep their R&D in South San Francisco, but they open up a facility to manufacture there. And they hire people from the local area. One of the things I hear all the time from people in that area is they say, hey, you know, biotech people can chase people from all over the world and bring them here for lots of money. And guess what? They get here and they're shocked because of, you know, it's expensive here. How about us? We hire people locally. You live with your mom still. There's my stand-up. They still live with their parents or with their families, and they're nearby. They're part of the community. And I think that's a real economic development engine, quite honestly. All right, so thank you. Those are the 5 microclimates. I tracked companies for the past 10 years to see what's going on, and so I tracked 100 companies here. Sorry for the data, but I'll walk you through it quickly. 23 companies out of 100, they moved to Fremont from other parts of the other microclimates. Okay. 10 moved to Silicon Valley, 12 moved to South San Francisco, 10 moved to San Francisco from other places. 45 moved out, but 55 stayed here. So the really interesting story is, yeah, okay, so when it's time for companies to move out because they have a commodity product, 45 of them left the area. And I had the good fortune to be able to interview most of these companies about why they left. And so you move to Fremont to scale up and manufacture. You move to Silicon Valley because you got funded by those venture capitalists and they want to keep an eye on you. And they want you close to some of your other specialty suppliers, right? You move to South San Francisco because, hey, proximity pipeline matters. You know, you want to be close to some of the big players there. So fascinating data, fascinating story about the movement within the Bay Area. And so here, I mean, we often talk about, remember I said about ecosystems earlier? The really interesting thing about ecosystems is that we don't always know about this whole concept of scale up within them. And so one of the areas that I've been able to publish in is because no one really talked about it enough is do companies just grow, just kind of develop and then leave the ecosystem? No, they actually stay and scale up in other parts of it. And if you have a biology background, or even if you're just interested in nature, you know that there's different parts of an ecosystem where, you know, you find different species, especially as they get up and grow and move on. And same thing with companies in the biomedical industry. So there's been a really nice story there as well. Okay. So finally, let me just, I've been trying to touch on this the whole way through today, because I know this is what all of you care about the most. And that is, you know, what's the future? And so what are the different resources your city or your, you know, area has? What are some of the, you know, whether it's talent, whether it's suppliers, other companies in the same part of the industry, how can you build around those resources? That's the key question. And so hopefully some of the things I've talked about today will help you do that. I'm always, like I said, always available to help you. And thanks for asking how I get paid. I'm already paid by somebody, so I'm happy to help. Okay, seriously. I'm really happy to. I work closely with Stephen Bader with East Bay EDA, and so he keeps me fed as well. And so, you know, I'm happy to help you with these types of questions. And just last, I want to finish up. Pleasanton's been what I dubbed the new tech leader here. They have over 60 biomedical companies, and many of them are in digital healthcare and genomics. And so it's a really nice story about how a lot of talent along the 680 corridor, a lot of proximity still to other parts of the Bay Area. There's a real strong kind of tech feel throughout 680, and I think you can build on that in this part of the biomedical industry. So let me stop there. Here's our big picture. Here's my card. Get a hold of me anytime, and I'm happy to help. And I still have 10 minutes. I wanted to be quick with my time so that you can ask me any questions. So please feel free. Is that Vicky? Yeah, you can pick who can ask the questions as well. And if you don't get your question answered today, just reach out to me. I'm happy to talk with you.
2 hands up here, right? 1, 2. Yes. Okay. Oh, who was first? Who was first? Absolutely.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. You touched on a lot of that I've heard is that, you know, these companies want to be close to the talent pool. I kind of want to focus on the talent pool a little bit. And in terms of a big, you know, one of the biggest issues we face here is affordability and high cost of living. You know, you hear about people wanting to move to areas where it's much cheaper to live and be able to afford bigger homes and all that. I'm just curious, are you kind of seeing that trend within workers who work in there? And, you know, is that a case that's happening in Vacaville right now? That's why are these tech companies following where more experienced workers would be going if they want to get in that next stage in their personal lives?
Right. Thank you. It's a really relevant question, right? So what I see in the biomedical industry is a lot less footlooseness. Okay. Kenny Loggins, right? What I see is these companies are much more anchored to their physical labs. During the pandemic, most of the companies I work with were up and running. They had clinical trials that were in process. They were manufacturing. They got exemptions as well because they were in the healthcare sector, but they kept working. One of the things that's been really interesting over the past 10 years, we've been tracking just what these maps look like, because I showed you 2022 maps because we just updated our database, and we've been updating them every year. Well, you know how you drop ink on a piece of paper, it spreads? The ink drops have been more and more concentrated over time. And so South San Francisco's growing up. Emeryville, Berkeley's adding more and more companies. Fremont's adding more and more companies. So it isn't spreading the way we think it would, right? We think, oh yeah, cost is going to drive people out. Now the pandemic threw a little wrench on this because more and more people are able to work remotely. So I think there's something there, but the companies have not spread like you would think. You know, there's this natural inclination to think that, you know, everything's going to spread out and, you know, move further and further out to Manteca, and beyond. It hasn't happened. It really hasn't happened in this industry. And one of the things I love is journalists love to, you know, have a attention-grabbing story, right? And so they have, I think, a stock photo of a moving truck, and they say, oh, this company left the area. I have the data. I'm a data person, not and anecdotes are fun because they start a research project because you think, hey, that's an interesting story. Let me look at the data. The data doesn't bear that out. The data bears out that the companies are getting more and more concentrated in the few areas that they are, and they're not leaving the Bay Area the way we thought they were, or the way that people talked about that they would be. So does that answer your question? Yeah, good. Yes.
Very informative. The mission for Diablo Valley Tech Initiative is how do we in North 680, Walnut Creek, Concord, Pleasant Hill, Highway 4 corridor, get companies to come. So if we could fix 3 things overnight, what would you tell jurisdictions or private enterprise?
Sure. Number one, and it's so simple, and again, it's me being a geographer, I guess me being a engineer/geographer. Once companies know what the resources are in a particular location, that is so illuminating. Now, Stephen and I mentioned Stephen and I are working on a project right now to identify all of the suppliers of different types and make that aware so people can go in a database and search and go, hey, I'm looking for a specialty electrician. I'm looking for a specialty welder. I'm looking for someone who makes these types of adhesives. And so number one, I had three, right? You want three, right? Number one is a realization of the resources within a jurisdiction and make sure people know that. And part of that's buildings, but part of it's infrastructure. But a big part of that is supply, what I call supply networks. What are the supply networks? So that's number one. Number two, boy, matching talent up, because all industries, it's about the people, but this industry especially, this is so knowledge intensive at every level. If you're running a processing facility, or you're developing a new drug, it's what's in between your ears. It really is. This is well-trained people, people dedicated to doing high quality work. I'm so inspired by being part of this industry because people are so engaged in doing high quality work. This isn't, hey, we'll just make this thing and it'll sell anyway. No, this is people's lives depend upon this expertise. So matching the talent up with the needs of the companies. I mentioned Ohlone College. Ohlane's done an amazing job to build biotech and medical device and equipment into their curriculum. They're placing all their students in local companies, and so one of the second thing would be to make sure that that's linked up. The talent development's linked up closely. I think the third actually is just being able to kind of identify the companies and then link them up with service providers like myself. There's a lot of resources that are available throughout the Bay Area for companies to help them, identify whether they need intellectual property protection, help them with their design of their products, help them identify how to build a manufacturing facility. So I think giving help to the companies, as those of you who are working with incubators, you know this right on. I mean, it's great to give them space, but what they really want is, what else do I get for that rent? There's incubators all over the place, right? And so I think those would be the three. So one is the supply networks, two would be the talent, and three would be the expertise to help actually advance the companies from startup to scale up.
Next question.
A couple of points with respect to sort of advertising the resources of the area. I'm reminded of the New Yorker cartoons about the Bay Area view of the world, and Biotech Bay, but you could have something like create a map that has the 680 corridor or something like that. But second of all, my question is whether you've done a similar analysis for the adjacent fields, related adjacent, for example, ag tech, animal health. Are there similar analyses for that?
Right. Well, thank you. I get asked that question a lot in some different versions. And last week I was asked by a group from the UK. They said, could you do it for the UK, please? Can you come back with us on a plane? So 2 points. One is, I don't know a lot especially beyond biomedical. So I try to focus on what I know. So I think that's really important, because once I start trying to do other things, I don't think I'm the expert that really needs that effort. So that's number one. Number two, from a framework point of view or a methodology point of view, I'm all in to help someone who knows ag tech, who knows a whole range of things, clean tech, for example, or auto tech. These are some great areas, right? I know there's been a real movement towards autonomous vehicles up here in the Concord area over time. And I think there's some fascinating new tech areas. And so I'm all in to provide a methodology about how to do that. But I think it makes sense to work with people who really know the industry.
Developing new crop technologies and new animal health care.
Right. And point well taken. I mean, those types of nuances I'm not familiar with. And so I can help you with a 510K process for a medical device. I know that, and I know how that influences the evolution of a company. But in other sectors, it's more challenging. But I'm all in to help somebody with the overall method.
Hi, at our lunch table, we were talking about the remote work trend. How are you seeing that ripple through this industry?
Yeah, thank you. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. First of all, it didn't hit the same way from the start. Most of the manufacturing facilities, even a place like Bayer, which is very much in the public eye, and they were always at least at about 50 or 60% capacity as far as people on site. And so across the industry, most companies did not have people work remote. In part, well, if anyone knew how to mask up, this industry knew how to mask up. And so they had that down already. Clean rooms got that, ventilation got that. I think we learned a lot from the industry in many ways, and that's one of the things. So the work remote, I mean, let me just say this though, and I always tell my business students in my classes sometimes too, and I say, hey, don't shy away from the biomedical industry. 30% of the jobs go to people without an engineering or science background. So I think those are the jobs that went remote, business development, finance, those types of jobs. And so I think that certainly was the case. But the other 70%, the lab testing, lab-based jobs, the manufacturing jobs, those stayed pretty steady time period.
Another question, you were listing out the subsectors earlier, which was really interesting, I think, to all the economic development professionals in the room. Can you reiterate which ones are active in this region? And then kind of touching on my colleague at the City of Concord's question earlier, are there certain subsector workforces that are more likely to follow affordability?
Great, yes, excellent questions, thank you. When my students ask questions like that, I take notice, so thank you. Let me see if I can do justice. So let me reiterate, that was the first part, right? Medical device and equipment companies are much more, have a broader range of available jobs, okay? And so in other words, yes, there are people who are designing the machines and setting up the processes, but there's a whole range of people who are machine operators, clean room operators, assemblers. And so medical device and equipment, you know, if as an economic development professional, you're thinking, I want jobs for a lot of people and a broad range of people. And so there's a real match there if you have the workforce that can fill that range, okay? Number one. Pharmaceuticals tends to be more operator heavy, but also more likely to automate. And so if we look at the different sectors and look at the kind of head count per dollar, for example, pharmaceutical has the lowest one, okay? So much closer to automation. Biotech is very, very labor intensive and very few things in the lab are automated. We're working on it, that's a new tech area, but it's very, very labor intensive. Digital healthcare and genomics, a whole lot of coding and a whole lot of electronics and assembly as well on the medical device, on the healthcare device side, digital healthcare device side. Now, that's the first question, right? The second question, which is really good too, and that's the propensity to travel along with the relocation of the company, right? Wow, that's an interesting one. Well, you know, biotech companies, they attract people from all over the world, right? Because there's highly trained expertise, but they're expensive. And as I said earlier, they're shocked. Every time I talk to a company and they bring somebody in, they're like, I got to be able to keep them here because it's so much more expensive than they imagined. They thought they got a great deal and they didn't. But that talent is more not footloose, but more mobile globally, all right? And I think it probably needs to be. When I looked at, we did a study back in 2016, and we looked at the education levels in all of the six of the subsectors of the industry, and biotech had 90%, close to 90% had at least a master's degree. Bachelor's, it was, you know, everyone had bachelor's degrees, and many people had PhDs as well. So, yeah, so different patterns and different kind of like kind of migration patterns, I guess. Did that answer your question? Your questions? Okay, good.
Okay, we have time for one last question.
Hi. So going back to Fremont as a case history, what did Fremont do with the approval process that other cities can learn from?
Thank you. Yeah, great question. Thanks. They talked to companies, which again, I'll give Kelly and Christina Briggs, you might know Christina as well. Christina Briggs took over after Kelly went to the city of San Jose. Kelly and Christina went and talked to companies. The first thing they did, in fact, Stephen introduced me to Christina and Kelly, and we went on a little road show, and we probably visited 10 companies right away. And I think, Stephen, you probably made it available to everyone, right? Said, you know, Karen Ingalls was there. She helped set this up as well. And so we went and talked to these companies, and they said a whole range of things. Hey, we got to know who your fire chief is, okay? And we want to know how quickly we can get the police here. And we want to know how the neighbors feel about hazardous waste. And we want to know how long it takes to get a permit. And they went through and had listening sessions with these companies and said, hey, what do you need? What do you need to expand? What do you need when you move to a new location? What would have made your life easier? And so they came in with a full package of, here's all the numbers you need. Here's the introductions to the people you want to know. Here's a streamlined permit process, and we promise 60 days and you'll have all these permits. Yeah, so they went through and put together a full kind of like, here's what they said, here's what we're doing. Again, this goes to Christina. I think the world of Christina. She actually had a spreadsheet, and she had a whole list of things that the company said that made their lives difficult. And then on the other hand, she had columns about here's what we're going to do, and then she periodically circles back and sees, hey, how's it working? So I mean, that may not be rocket science. I'm not an economic development person, but I was always really impressed with what they did, the listening, and then the how did we respond to that, and what can we put in place. And it's, like I said, they've doubled the number of companies in the 10 years. So.
Okay, that wraps up our session with our keynote speaker. Thank you, Gregory. Let's show Gregory appreciation.